Next speaker is definitely not going to let you fall asleep. Yes, a very interesting session coming up next. Let's look forward to that as I welcome on stage Mr. Mohan Jayaraman, Managing Director, Experian Credit Information Company of India. Let us put our hands together as he steps on stage. He's someone who comes with an experience of working with the global lines of business to ensure the company's world-class credit bureau platform and a lot more. Let's put our hands together. We have more energy. We just had lunch. Thank you.
Thanks. A very good afternoon to all of you, and thanks for drumming up the enthusiasm. I was just going to start off by saying that I have about 150 slides that are fairly complex looking. I thought that would wake you up a little better. But let's go with what I have right now. I should, over the next about 10-15 minutes, take you through some interesting things that we are doing in the Indian landscape relating to managing fraud, application fraud, an important part of the business, especially as we are going towards the hinterlands, going towards financial inclusion, and covering more people within the scope of what we are trying to do within financing. I start with a quick introduction to Experian by way of agenda, take you through the solution that we have in place that's actually working in India for the last couple of years now. Some of the things that we are seeing as trends that are coming through on the retail side relating to fraud, and talk about some of the next wave of fraud detection techniques that we're trying to put in place in the country. By way of a quick introduction, Experian, for those of you who've not been introduced to us in any form, is a data and analytics company. We are one of the largest companies in our space, about a $5 billion company globally with presence across 39 odd countries. We are a FTSE 25 company and have a presence across multiple areas in the data and analytics space. We are, as I mentioned, market leaders. This is a slide that we go through in some level of detail. You'll notice a few names here, Experian, Equifax, TransUnion, etc., as names that you are acquainted with in some form. You'll notice again that Experian is by far the largest player in this space. We are about 2 times the size of our nearest competitor. The 3 big players in this space are the players that you are acquainted with in India: Experian, Equifax, and TransUnion, the 3 bureaus in the country. The thing that we point out about this slide is the fact that you'll notice that there's a blue patch that we've talked about in terms of our revenues there. That talks about the amount of revenues that we have coming through from the geographies outside of the US. Our presence in the developing markets is fairly large. And why is that relevant to us, and why is that relevant to this discussion? To a great extent, because we believe that the developing market presence and the developing market requirements are very different from the developed market pieces. The work that we do in the developed markets are more around advanced analytics, whereas work that we do in developing markets more around areas like fraud detection, identity detection, and so on and so forth. And that's exactly what we'll talk about over the next few slides. We have a presence across multiple businesses. We run credit bureaus in about 19 countries. We run an analytics business that's fairly large by its own right. We run a marketing services business, and we also do a lot of work on the direct-to-consumer side of the business. Essentially, if you look at the spread of the products that we have, our presence is across the entire life cycle of the customers. So if you look at the typical life cycle that you go through as a financial institution, you prospect and source the customers, look at underwriting them, look at managing them through their customer life cycle, and then move on to the collection phase. Our solutions and services are basically centered around all 4 of these areas, and that's broadly where we have a presence. The Indian presence of Experian is about 10 years old. We started our journey in India in 2006, and as we stand right now, we are one of the 4 bureaus that's licensed by the Reserve Bank to run a bureau in the country. We are also the providers of the largest fraud detection service in the country. We run also, for the insurance industry, a closed user group of fraud detection service, again, arguably one of the largest in its scale and size. What I wanted to talk to you about, and the focus of this session, was on the solution called Hunter that we have had in place in India for the last couple of years now. Basically a solution that's focused on trying to detect fraud. And the key theme of what I wanted to cover was to give you a sense of what Hunter does differently from some of the other products that compete with it in the marketplace. To start with, I wanted to give you a context of Experian in the fraud landscape and talk about what we are doing there. As I mentioned, we are one of the largest players in this space and have a closed user group to detect fraud that we've had in place for the last about 6 years now. Today, Experian Hunter processes about 2 million credit applications, and I'll talk about the latest savings later. But in the year FY15, for instance, we would have saved the banking system upwards of something like about 1,100 crores odd in frauds that they have prevented from entering the financial system, money that's well spent in perhaps ensuring that the customers are supported a little better. Today, Hunter has about 51 banks and institutions that are member of the core setup, and also 18 life insurance companies that are part of the life insurance extension of what we put through in Hunter. I already mentioned the scale of the number of applications that we process within Hunter. I'll talk a little while later of some of the fraud trends, and I promised that earlier. But the key thing that we have been trying to do within the industry is to highlight some of the key trends in fraud that's happening within the industry and within specific verticals within the industry, and you'll notice some quick good trends that are coming through there. I also wanted to give a sense of Hunter in the global plane. While we are talking about fraud detection, the thing that stands apart as far as Hunter is concerned is the fact that it's also a global solution that we put out not just in India, but across multiple geographies. You'll notice a presence that we have across multiple geographies where we run this as a service for the banking system and have helped the banking system save hundreds of millions of dollars over the course of the years. So, getting on to the subject on hand then, the theme of today was to focus on detecting frauds. But for all of us who are running businesses here, the key theme is not just to detect fraud, but to ensure that we are doing this with as little disruption of the business as possible to the remaining 99.9% of the customers who are the good, right customers for our institutions. So, the necessity of a good fraud detection service is not just the fact that it needs to ensure that it's capturing the set of people who are fraudulent, but also ensuring that the people who are non-fraudulent are being taken care of and are able to pass through the system in a much faster way with as little inconvenience as possible. The Hunter solution basically is a solution that is a hosted setup that we provide to the industry and operates at two levels. The first level that it operates in is within your own individual organizations, where it resides within with a set of rules that it tries to apply to your local data sets. And it also has what we call a national Hunter profile. The National Hunter setup basically includes data from across the closed user group of the 50 odd institutions that we talked about that are part of National Hunter that share data among themselves. The key thing that I wanted to point out here is that this is a fairly unique thing that we've done in India and perhaps stands to scrutiny as one of the largest closed user groups for fraud detection that we put in place world over. This is a unique setup where 50 odd institutions have today come together and have said that they will share fraudulent data and ensure that the fraudsters are kept out of the system. So between the local Hunter mode and the national Hunter mode, Hunter basically ensures that there is a lot of prevention of fraud that can happen within your institutions, as also preventing fraud that's taking place in other institutions that it can prevent from coming into your own setup. The kind of frauds that it can identify, move on from omitted information to identity theft, false identity, the man of straw applications as we call them, data manipulation. You'll notice when I talk about the fraud trends over the next few slides, that there are a lot of things that come through in terms of data changes that people make in their credit applications while they apply into institutions in order to make themselves eligible for loans. And the data manipulation is a key part of what Hunter tries to detect. And the last part of this, the service, is also to look at the way it can detect organized fraud rings. The way Hunter does this is through looking at the credit applications that come into your organization. Let's actually take a hypothetical case of a credit application that's been made into your organization. What Hunter does is it takes a credit application that's come in and looks at the various component information pieces that are there, goes back into the database and looks at all the information that's available. So for instance, if I as Mohan have applied into your organization with a certain set of certain pieces of information, my mobile number, my address, few other details, my employer and so on, what it does is go back into the database and pulls out all kinds of related records. What it then does is looks at whether there is any discrepancy that's coming out in the noted application, which might come on account of, let's say, changes in name that somebody might have made, changes in PAN number that somebody might have made, address information that somebody might have fudged, bank account information that somebody might have fudged. The basic principle that it operates with is the fact that fraudsters tend to slip up on some of the common parts of the application data that they end up getting wrong. So most fraudsters get about 99% of the information right, but they miss about 1% of the data. And this is the 1% that Hunter focuses on to try and see if it can actually detect that discrepancy. The second thing that it does is also look at what we call velocity rules. So for example, the number of times that somebody has applied with the same kind of details into the system. For instance, number of applications within a certain period of time, application for the same product within a certain period of time, the same address appearing in multiple applications and so on and so forth. All of these also trigger off what we call velocity rules within Hunter, and a composite of these two are used by Hunter to detect frauds. So what makes the Hunter fraud repository different from the other fraud repositories that are present in the country right now? We've tried to compare the key components of what Hunter does differently from what, let's say, some of the other systems do. The basic difference between Hunter and some of the other systems that do fraud detection in the country right now is most systems depend on trying to find out the fraudulent person. So again, taking a practical example, most systems focus on trying to see if someone has made an application into your organization. They try and find out if that individual is fraudulent. Later on, I'll talk about the trends of fraud in the country, where we'll talk about 77% of the frauds that happen in this country happening on account of identity thefts, which means somebody applying, impersonating another person. So by the way, that person is not going to appear in a negative deduplication because that's incidentally a good customer. So what Hunter does differently is it does the obvious check of ensuring that it's looking at the fraudulent customer, running the negative deduplication, so to speak. But it also does what we call a positive deduplication. Go back and look at whether this customer is appearing in the positive data in any form. And why is this important? What happens in the case of someone who's impersonating another person? So for example, if somebody has impersonated me and applied into one of your institutions, the odds are that they would have gotten 1% of the information wrong, but 99% of the information will be correct. So what ends up happening in a positive deduplication is that you end up going back into the database and picking up my applications that are appearing within the system, and you compare the two of them, and it will be obvious to you that there is that 1% difference between the two applications that are visible right now. As a consequence, the positive dedupe actually ensures that you are able to pick up the fraudulent cases much better. What Hunter also lets you do is to encode the IP that you have created within your own organization to manage fraud as something that it puts in as an additional set of rules that you can encode within Hunter. It also lets you create a set of rules that are local to Hunter and a set of rules that are part of the national repository. That way ensuring, for instance, that there is a common set of rules that you are able to apply at a common industry level. One of the examples of this is what we have done, for example, in the insurance industry, where we basically put a set of rules for the insurance industry on the whole. About 8-9 months back, the life insurance industry, as an industry, had come through to us and asked whether we could actually take up the job of putting an application for them which would actually detect life insurance fraud. As it turns out, fraudsters are reasonably agnostic to industry. They don't mind going to life insurance or going into mortgages or into any other product. It's an industry. They don't mind making money wherever they can get it from. So what we ended up doing is putting a system that actually detects fraud from within the life insurance industry. And the way we did this here was to look at actually the rules being applied at a national level across the industry. And there we find that the ability to sort of impute some of these rules across the industry is extremely strong, and the ability to predict fraud is fairly strong as well. The other thing that's implicit in the solution is the fact that Hunter already comes with the fact that it's embedded within the banking industry. So it comes with a data repository of about 300 odd million consumers whose data is present within it, another about 20 million fraudsters whose information is also residing within the database. And lastly but not the least, the primary difference is also the fact that Hunter comes with a clear set of future proofing that we've actually put in place. So for instance, I'll over the next few slides talk about, for example, the new kinds of frauds that are happening in terms of devices being used to impersonate individuals and perpetrate fraud. So some of the things that Hunter can do is actually prevent the ability to stop, bring in the ability to stop some of these kinds of frauds. Quickly to go through the kind of members that we have on board right now across the banks, you will see most of the large banks are already part of the Hunter closed user group, as are, for example, non-banks. Within the housing finance industry as well, we have a fair bit of presence. And it's also pertinent to note, for instance, that some of the banks also have their own LAP portfolios or their mortgage portfolios. So to that extent, the coverage of mortgage data is fairly comprehensive within Hunter. Last but not the least is also the life insurance industry coverage, with most of the large names again already present within the Hunter data set. The next 1 or 2 minutes, I'll possibly quickly take you through the last fraud report that we prepared, which had looked at the kind of fraud trends that happen across different products. The key thing to note is that across all products, predominantly two-wheelers, home loans, personal loans, etc., we've seen higher levels of fraud rates come through over the last 1.5 years. We have seen consumer durables record the largest amount of fraud, again, not surprisingly. We have seen certain categories of frauds grow while others have come down. The one thing that I'm happy to usually point out is the fact that if you notice within this chart, we've called out the fraud type. And one of the things that we point out is that the repeat attempts at fraud has actually come down within the Hunter users. So the fraudsters are learning individuals. They find out that somebody is already using Hunter, and they don't try and perpetrate fraud on them. So the instance of fraud has actually come down in terms of repeat attempts within the group from about 10% to about 5% now. Great thing to note about 3/4 of the fraud that happen in this country is happening on account of identity theft, which means people who are impersonating you and me going into the banking system to take loans. Which also means, by the way, that when the credit report for these individuals is taken, this is a positive report that's likely to come out. And hence, the credit bureau check is not a good check enough for you to prevent fraud. A fraud check is independently required to ensure that identity theft is taken care of. There's also a lot of information that's actually presented that's fraudulent. If you look at the amount of contact information fraud that's increased between Q1 2014 to Q1 2015, we've seen about a 4-fold increase in the fraudulent contact information that's come through. Mortgage by itself has seen about a 50% increase in fraud levels that we've seen reported across the 2 years that we've actually tracked this information. Last but not the least, the industry savings on account of use of Hunter over the financial year 16. The industry has actually saved something like about 4,000 crores of frauds that they have prevented from entering the financial system as a consequence of using Hunter. The last thing that I wanted to sort of leave you with was the next wave, so to speak. I mentioned that Hunter provides certain level of future proofing in terms of ensuring that frauds that can come into your organizations in the future are taken care of. What is the means by which it does that? We talked about identity theft moving into the realm of devices primarily, and one of the things that Hunter is capable of doing right now is ensuring, as we speak, that it can also track the identity of the devices through which applications are happening. Consequently, the ability to sort of prevent fraud at a device level. We call this feature the device insight, but it's something that ensures that it's able to track fraud at the level of a device. Increasingly, fraudsters are, they don't buy a different computer to go and impersonate another person. They use the same computer to impersonate two people. So as a consequence, the ability to sort of determine that it's the same machine that's doing both of these is an important feature, and it's an important attribute of what can actually future-proof you in terms of your fraud requirements. The last part of what I wanted to talk about was the theme, fundamentally is in terms of the next wave of solutions providing transaction monitoring, moving into device authentication, the device through which the consumer is operating. For many of us, it's mobile phones right now, it's tablets. These are becoming our identities. Means by which we are able to detect that this is the right device through which the consumer is dealing with us is going to become increasingly important. And the last is to ensure that the consumer identity is something that's also highlighted as a part of that service, and that you're able to associate the consumer with their devices. So with that, I'm going to leave you with the thought that the whole theme of what the industry is looking to in terms of financial inclusion requires also strong systems of fraud detection as you're going out into the marketplace and sourcing customers. And we believe that some of these solutions in the new age are absolute requirements and base necessities as you venture into the next domain. Thank you.